What's the name of that game? It's all about exploring vast worlds, meeting and interacting with NPCs, going on quests, and, of course, combing through dungeons. The Legend of Zelda series, right? The game series I most often talk about on this channel. Well, yes, but in this case, I'm talking about Dungeons and Dragons, which over the course of the last year and a half or so has unfortunately become something of an obsession for me. So, why am I making this video? I figure there's likely a healthy overlap between TTRPG players, that's tabletop role-playing games, and those who enjoy games like Zelda, right? Did you know that my most viewed live stream on this channel of all time was a random Skyward Sword stream titled Errands for the Water Dragon plus my favorite dungeon in Skyward Sword, which unintentionally brought in a bunch of viewers who searched the keyword Dungeons and Dragons and then stayed for the Zelda. And if you find yourself watching this video and not being someone that's in the overlapping section of that Venn diagram, why am I doing this with my hands? Then perhaps your curiosity has piqued enough to give one or the other a try? Maybe? More anecdotally, perhaps. As I've openly discussed D&D with many other Zelda fans and content creators alike, it always reaffirms to me how large of an overlap it must be. I've had 4 separate people tell me that they've either already made or have been working on Zelda-flavored adaptations or modules for D&D. That number actually goes up to 5 if you count me, myself. I've been cooking. It's not hard to see why. The universe of The Legend of Zelda serves as a great fantasy backdrop, and D&D is not necessarily a singular setting, but rather a system of play that is extremely malleable. So in this video, I'd like to ramble and go on about a few different D&D related topics, for which there will be timestamps, fret not. And if this video performs well enough, then I'll consider that a sign that the game resonates enough with my audience to perhaps produce more D&D content in the future? Maybe?
Genie. You want a chin scratchy? Chin scratchies. Yes.
So first, my personal history with D&D. I've been exposed to Dungeons and Dragons in some shape or form for pretty much as far back as my memory goes. My mom and stepdad were, and still are, avid D&D players, and I'd end up learning quite a lot as a kid from sheer osmosis. However, I never actually played growing up because my father, my actual father, was against it due to what I assume is residual satanic panic from the 70s and 80s. That said, there was a pretty large disparity between the camaraderie I witnessed at the table, friends enjoying a game together, versus the moral shortcomings I was being told about. But regardless, D&D would sort of fade into the background of my life and not be something I would find myself really engaging with for quite some time. I would have school, and then later I would have work, and then a marriage and a child to raise, etc. There are a few notable catalysts that actually got me trying to start playing. First, in June of 2023, very shortly after Tears of the Kingdom released, Critical Role, which I was aware of but hadn't actually watched any of, released a Zelda-themed one-shot. This was pretty cool because, for one thing, Matt Mercer is the voice actor who plays Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom, and they got to do the whole thing with Nintendo's blessing to boot, which is pretty rad. This one-shot is 5 hours long, and somehow I was just absorbed watching this thing. I laughed so hard my sides were aching. That's not an exaggeration. And frankly, watching this made me really want to just play, to give it an honest try. The only thing I didn't know was where to get started or who to play with. So I sat on it for a while, and I did nothing. Another notable show is Dimension 20. I'm a huge fan of Dropout, and you can thank my friend Shublima for getting me back into them a couple years back. I was familiar with College Humor from back in the day, and I mean way back in the day, but I had not kept up with them in ages. So rediscovering them and what they had transformed into was really cool. So in 2024, when I ended up paying for my own subscription, I binged through a lot, and I do mean a lot, of Dimension 20. This only further solidified for me that, frankly, I needed to play this game. I craved it. So by the end of 2024, I was determined to find a table to sit at. As it turned out though, finding one was a lot easier than I imagined, and I was massively overthinking the entire thing. I ended up being able to assemble a group made up of some of my closest IRL friends, who all fell on a spectrum of having dabbled a little to having played a lot. Ironically, perhaps, since I was the one bringing this table together, I was the least experienced player at the table. But for me, being a little out of my depth is a good way to learn. She's licking herself so loudly back there. So in January of 2025, we started a new campaign. Our party consists of a human fighter, a human artificer whose entire personality is that he's Italian, an orc cleric, and my character, a half-elf bard named Fluter Flam. Together, we've been exploring a completely homebrewed campaign setting made by our gracious DM, filled with political intrigue, conspiracy, dungeon crawls, and, most importantly, a lot of laughs between friends. I won't get too much into what has transpired in this campaign because it's still ongoing, but I will say that it has been a joy. You getting your foot clean? She's really getting that clean, isn't it? I should also mention that during the 2024 to 2025 school year, that my son also separately started playing D&D with his friends at school through their school's D&D club, which is really cool that they have that. Now, I'm not privy to too much of what happened during their campaign, but it was really awesome seeing his enthusiasm about the game. Just as a dad, I like it when he likes things, I guess. I don't know. His only complaint was that the club didn't meet as often as he'd like, which is, fair. That's the true D&D experience, isn't it? Now we're fast forwarding again. For Christmas, my wife got for me the Heroes of the Borderlands box set, since she knew that I had some interest in running games myself as a DM. Now, as a new DM, this box set was instrumental to me picking up the skills needed to run the game. It is a starter set, and it does the job extremely well, getting you started. First, let's take a look at what's inside the box. There's some books with encounters, there's maps, tokens for players and enemies alike, more tokens for various other things, stat blocks, initiative trackers, cards with NPCs and items, pre-made character sheets for the classic party of rogue, wizard, cleric, and fighter, which includes leveling up from level 1 to 3, and of course, a bunch of dice.
Oh shit, I rolled a nat 20.
Most sets of dice you can buy will include a D4, a D6, a D8, 2 D10s, a D12, and a D20. This set, perhaps knowing which dice are most often needed, comes with all the usuals, but increases it to 4 D6 and 2 D20. As a side note, they are red. And my own dice collection was actually missing red, so it was sort of perfect in that sense too. I don't know if the mic is picking up, but she's snoring. The books include with them a campaign setting, the titular Borderlands. And if you didn't know this box set is actually an adaptation of a first edition campaign from 1979 called Keep on the Borderlands. Our new 5.5e version of this includes 3 books. One that covers the keep, one that covers the wilderness outside of the keep, and one that covers the nearby network of caverns known as the Caves of Chaos. Despite including a load of NPCs, enemies, and encounters, one thing that these books are severely lacking is an actual story. I've heard this come up as a criticism of the set, but I actually really like that about it. The quick play guide specifically touches on that aspect. Here's what it says. The adventure in this set is for 2 to 4 characters of level 1 to 3. The adventure has no overarching plot. While there are conflicts and secrets to uncover, the story that emerges is the one that your group experiences. I actually really like that. This box set invites you to follow the spirit of the game and improvise together. So we did. My wife, son, and I played this adventure together. For about 2 months, 3 to 4 times a week, we played our little campaign in the Borderlands, which I'll detail in this section. First things first, I, as the DM, read all 3 of the books as well as the quick play guide from cover to cover. Now, it even says in here itself, you don't have to do this. I did because I was just extremely keen to. One thing I noted is that they recommend a sort of structure of starting in the wilderness, moving to the keep, and then going into into the caves. I tossed that. I thought it would be more interesting to spend the campaign constantly weaving between these 3 areas as we saw fit. Another note is about those pre-made character sheets. Neither of my players wanted to use them. They wanted to make their own characters from scratch using different classes than what was provided here, which I welcomed. The whole thing with D&D is like doing your own thing, you know? Now, in the campaign I mentioned earlier in which I'm a player, I've primarily used physical books and paper and pencil character sheets. But D&D Beyond makes character creation really easy, especially for first-time players. So with my wife having never played before but wanting very much to do her own thing, we went with that. So we began the campaign. My wife was playing a tiefling ranger and my son a human warlock. I wanted to allow them to play however they wanted, but I did have an immediate concern. I only had 2 party members in a campaign that is mostly designed for 4, and they were both a little, shall we say, squishy. This concern pretty quickly dissipated when a pattern emerged. They wanted to adopt almost every NPC they encountered into the party. It kept happening that they would meet characters and want to bring them along. My worry about this was that as the DM, I was playing all these characters, so I schemed. I set up some limitations. Some NPCs simply wouldn't want to work with others, and the keep itself needed a certain amount of characters to remain there to keep things running, as opposed to going off adventuring. But I made sure that the other characters they liked that didn't get to go along adventuring with them would have chances to show up again later in the adventure. I ended up setting up one particular situation where they could make the final decision to choose 2 characters that would essentially become full-time party members. Remember those pre-made character sheets? They included a fighter, a cleric, a rogue, and a wizard. Those were the options of NPCs that they could take. Haldrick, the dwarf innkeeper that they also met out hunting, he was the fighter. Fazir, the temple curate they met when they decided to spare the bandit who ambushed them, Fazir became the cleric, while Prawl the bandit became the rogue. And as for the wizard, I made an original character named Rigel, who was a fellow adventurer who came to the keep to study under the guildmaster Torin and ended up becoming close friends with the players. Rigel was also a fun way for me to sort of flirt with my wife at the table, so there's that too. For adventuring purposes, they ended up recruiting Haldrick and Fazir, which meant that in addition to DMing, I was also playing 2 of the 4 party members. In the hopes of somewhat offsetting this imbalance, I treated them basically just as hirelings. I told my players that if at any point they had suggestions or orders that they'd like to give these 2, that they could. Otherwise, I had very basic courses of action for these characters to take if they weren't told what to do. I also left all important decision-making conversations in the players' hands, only contributing when they asked for Haldrick or Fazir's input, which they sometimes did, but for the most part they explored around the map where either their curiosity led them or when they felt compelled to follow up on a story element. At one point, after we had wrapped up the campaign, my son asked me how much I had gone off script from the books. My answer? Almost all of it. As I mentioned before, there's not really an actual story in here, so we had to make one that I tried to kind of riff off of the actions they were taking. I also ended up reworking or adding twists to almost all of the encounters, or would combine some elements from one into the other. I even added additional encounters, and the story ended up spinning out into its own thing in a way that was very uniquely ours. If you sat me at the table with 4 new players and asked me to run this campaign again, it could be very good, but it wouldn't be the same, because so much of what happened was based off of the decisions they made. I've seen some D&D YouTube channels talk about this box set, and every time I do, I get this weird feeling, like I'm a kid on the playground and another kid is playing with my toys, but he's got the characters all wrong. Speaking of going off script, at one point, an entire plot thread spun out from a simple mistake. Early on in the adventure, the party went to meet the Castellan of the Keep, a dwarf named Dwern, who gave them a few pointers and a couple of quest options. The only issue was that I'd messed up, and if you've played this campaign yourself, you probably already picked up on how. According to the book, Dwern is not the Castellan, Winvarl is. Now, I could retcon the situation and tell them, oh, I gave you the wrong name, or I played the wrong character, or whatever. Or I could roll with it. I could find a way to still introduce Winvarl Windvarl as the Castellan without erasing old Dwern here. So, after an excursion or two that involved battling cultists elsewhere, the party returned to the keep to find a coup had taken place in their absence, and Windvarl had taken over the keep. See, he's evil in my version. Now, the players were up against 3 factions and kind of caught up in the middle of it. The bandits that wreak havoc in the wilderness, the cultists who had set up headquarters in the Caves of Chaos, and a corrupt politician who was doing early stages of fascism in the keep. We made sure to tie in the characters' personal stakes as well. Somehow, magically, the cult had separated Dave the Warlock from his pseudo-dragon familiar in order to study the magical psychic link between familiars and their masters. Kaylee the Ranger turned out to be the reincarnation of a great hero in a war between elves and dwarves who was betrayed by one of their closest advisors, who in this generation was reincarnated as the cult leader, and now there's a personal grudge between them, in a plot thread that I totally stole from the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, with some heavy tweaking, mind you. Allowing ourselves as a group to deviate so much off book also led to a number of instances where we saw opportunities that were too cool to pass up. At one point in the cave called the Nothic's Lair, the party encountered the Nothic, who was accompanied by a flying animated sword. Kaylee, our tiefling ranger, had recently found this item, the Dreadhelm, and decided that this demonic-looking sword would sure pair well with it. She decided she wanted to have that sword. So after they killed the Nothic, while wearing the helmet, which gave her advantage, she rolled a nat 20 on her intimidation check to convince the flying animated sword to be her sword. So we went with it. How could I not? I hastily whipped up a system where when the characters would level up, the sword itself would also level up and gain some stat bumps. And at one point, they even snuck back into the keep to bring the sword to Callista the blacksmith for extra sharpening, so I gave it another stat bump. She named the sword Malignant, or Mal for short. And because it was a flying and animated sword, I allowed her to use it as a sword if she wanted, or allow it to move independently, treating it like basically another party member that she had control over, because it was too cool not to. So Mal became a full-on character, a part of the party. Because we didn't stick to the pre-made character sheets, we also outgrew the limitations that they presented. The box set is designed to facilitate characters from level 1 to 3, but by the end of the campaign, the party was 9th level. I found myself constantly reworking things on the fly to compensate for their growth in power, so that they didn't just steamroll everything. So when I prepared for an encounter, I did it by the books, and then I would also find some other creatures or combatants that would be interesting in this scenario and have them on standby. Basically, if things were too easy, I could add in more baddies, and if things were too hard, I could just withhold adding them. Along the way, we also ran a ton of different types of combat encounters, both those presented in the books, as well as those entirely cooked up by yours truly. From regular cave exploration to ambushes, both the players getting ambushed, as well as at one point them setting up an ambush. Rescue missions to a ritual that needed stopping, to a ritual that needed protecting, getting caught in the middle of a skirmish between 2 other factions, and more. It was a ton of fun. Perhaps the best compliment I got on my DMing was from my wife remarking that most combat encounters would push them very nearly to defeat, but that they would consistently manage to pull through. But it often felt like a narrow victory, where they had to burn through a lot of resources to get by, and think very carefully about their actions. For me personally, that's the sort of difficulty sweet spot where there's some real tension, but if they play it smart, they'll be just fine. Anyways, story stuff. After dealing with the cult and essentially recruiting a bunch of bandits, the campaign's final battle approached. Now, this thing comes with a lot of battle maps, but one that it does not include is one in the keep itself. So I decided to make a battle map of the keep in Roll20 and run a large-scale siege on the keep to take it back from the corrupt Windvarl. Due to the sheer massive scope that this would include, we ran things a little different. There were close to 50 enemy combatants on the map, including guards who acted as common mooks, sergeants as stronger enemies that would sort of lead groups of of guards. Think of them as like mid-bosses, and what I call boss-level enemies, including the newly promoted and corrupt captain of the guard, Yvette, who had become a sort of recurring rival character, Winvarl himself, and his advisor, a powerful wizard named Elandra. Just as a side note, the stat block Elandra is supposed to use in this is that of a noble, which is not that tough. But I realized that since Fazir here became their party cleric, that his curate stat block had not been used at all. So I gave that to Elandra and basically had her act as a powerful boss enemy. Winvarl just used the knight stat block, except I doubled his HP. The players meanwhile split into 2 teams to attack the keep at separate points, and each of them took with them a group of allies that I handed control of over to the players, essentially saying, you're each leading a group, and therefore are giving orders to the characters in that group. These allies consisted of the various NPCs that they'd recruited along the way, including a giant spider they named Terry, and Drella, the former captain of the guard under Dwern, who Winvarl fired, some bugbears that they met in a cave and then convinced to join them, and a ragtag handful of other NPCs that they had rallied to their cause, including Prawl the Bandit, who was one of the first enemies they encountered. And there was even a couple characters that they rescued within the keep during the siege, like Rigel and Shannik. By giving control of all of these characters over to my players, this also solved the issue of combat simply taking too long between their turns, since every allied character rolled initiative, while I ran the enemy initiative in batches. This meant that the players didn't really have time to mentally check out before they were back to moving another character. In short, I turned their final battle into a Fire Emblem level. In the end, the siege was a success. They defeated Winvarl, took prisoners, and reinstated Dwern into office. Happy endings all around. So I mentioned before that I've seen a lot of D&D tubers talk about this box set, which is great. I'm glad it's getting coverage. But there's a different perspective I'd like to offer here, because the commonality among all of them is that they are all DMs with a ton of experience. That's valuable. It's what makes them trustworthy D&D tubers. But I'd also like to offer a different perspective, one that they simply can't. That of a brand new DM, someone who's just getting into it. Not that what these people have to say doesn't have value, but it's inherently going to be coming from a different place. So as a first-time DM, would I recommend this box set? The answer is yes, obviously. Weren't you paying attention? But more importantly, use it to get started, but don't feel strictly beholden to it. Do as you see fit and deviate as much or as little as you'd like. Use these tools, but remember that these materials are here to serve your game, not dictate it. For me, the most fun I had was when I was cooking things up myself, and then seeing my players have fun with it. So with the Borderlands thing wrapped up, now at home we're running a new campaign. I bought the book Strixhaven Curriculum of Chaos, and we've got all new characters and story threads. But after this, I've been homebrewing some things. I liked the open-ended nature of the Borderlands box set, and I think it would be fun to explore the aftermath of those events in a sort of sequel campaign. And I've written a 7-page document, so a 7-page so far document detailing all the characters that they could meet, all the things they could maybe do if they choose to, and all these different places. I'm excited for it. There's also inevitably going to be those who feel the need to comment about their preferred edition of D&D or other TTRPG that they like to play, like Pathfinder or Daggerheart, and that's great. But I do think that just shouting at me about your preferences sort of misses the heart of the situation, that being the malleable nature of TTRPGs. I think having options for different systems is a good thing, but I also view D&D as like open source. Sure, Wizards of the Coast owns the trademark, but they don't own my table or how I choose to run it. That is entirely between me and my players, or when I'm a player, the fellow party members and our DM. We own this, not them. And I think that's what separates this from other forms of media. Hey, also, I spent a lot of time yapping about my own campaign. I just think this stuff is superbly cool, and I want to hear about it. So if you made it this far, I'd like to invite you to please yap in the comments below. Tell me about your game, or your character, or just something cool that happened. Whether it be some absurd bit of shenanigans, or a heartfelt moment, or that time you rolled a decisive nat 20 in what was otherwise a clenchy moment. Tell me about it. I genuinely want to read that stuff. So here we are. Unfortunately, I am obsessed with D&D. It was inevitable. Let me know if you want to hear more ramblings about the hobby. And thank you for allowing me to get all of this out here. I needed the outlet. And of course, thank you so much for watching. Special thanks goes out to my channel members here on YouTube, as well as my supporters on Patreon, who almost certainly didn't sign up for this kind of video. But don't worry, I am still working on my next Zelda video. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Bye-bye. Meow meow. For the camera, the one time you're quiet ever. The one time you're ever quiet is when I invite you to meow meow. You look so annoyed, baby. Look at you. My baby. I guess I'll let you nap, huh?